4, 3, 2.
Welcome to Westchester Jewish Community Services. As a leading agency in providing a comprehensive spectrum of human services, we have been helping people since 1943. We serve all people in Westchester County, regardless of age, income, or ethnicity. We provide a wide variety of essential and dynamic services that make a difference in people's lives. Children, teens, adults, and senior citizens are served by our network of programs located throughout the county. When people come to us for assistance, they become part of the WJCS family. Our highly trained and skilled staff focus on you and your family and are committed to becoming your partner in finding solutions. For more than half a century, we have been connecting people to services that help them overcome mental, physical, or emotional challenges. WJCS is here in your community when you need us.
Welcome to the Ways We Care of Westchester Jewish Community Services. I'm Dale Wang, Director of Community Relations. WJCS is in your community when you need us. We are funded by government grants, private foundations and individuals, UJA Federation, United Way, and corporations. March is Disabilities Awareness Month. During the month of March, we recognize the efforts and achievements of people with disabilities. In reality, however, we celebrate the abilities and strengths of individuals who are challenged by physical and mental deficits and who develop methods of coping and finding success that can bring considerable satisfaction. WJCS has many programs and services that help people with disabilities achieve their potential. In our group residences for adults with developmental disabilities, we enable individuals to live in community settings and interact socially and recreationally with others in a supervised environment. Our clinical counseling programs for people with developmental disabilities and their families help people address their personal challenges. In our clinic, school, and community-based programs, we help children, teens, adults, and seniors who struggle with emotional, psychological, and learning problems. We connect homebound people one to another for mutual support and offer intensive supports that enable individuals who have suffered traumatic brain injuries to live independently. Tonight we are going to offer two options for supports for people with disabilities. One from self-advocates and service coordinators who have lived with physical and developmental challenges. And in our second segment, we will talk about therapeutic services for children with autistic spectrum disorders. We are very fortunate this evening to have three very impressive guests who are active as advocates for and advisors to people with disabilities. And I'd like to introduce Mitchell Levitz, who works with the Consumer Resource Center for WIHD and who is a part of the self-advocacy program of the New York State Speakers Bureau. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you.
And Scott Fowler, who is also a part of the Speakers Bureau. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
And Jackie Fowler, who is with the Consumer Resource Center of WIHD, and Scott's mom.
Thank you.
So welcome to all of you. Mitch, we had some time this week to talk on the phone, and I really wanted you to share how you became involved and became an advocate for people with disabilities.
Well, it's actually started a long time ago. I went to many places and I talked to many groups like parents, families, other survivors, teachers, employers, teachers. So I go around to many groups, talk to them about the importance of having a disability, and to really to express why it is important, why it is important to listen to people with disabilities, because many of them have a lot to offer.
What started you as someone who felt that he could speak and talk to others about your experiences?
I guess it started many years ago, because I was brought up in a way that would allow other individuals to speak out for themselves.
So really you had encouragement from your family?
Family, friends, colleagues, everyone that I have known.
And you have a bit of a unique background because you're also an author.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book and the title? I didn't get the title of it, and what you say in your book, what
Sure.
you were able to describe.
Actually, both me and another friend of mine, Jason Kingsley, who also has Down syndrome, written a book together, and it's called Countless Sin: Growing Up with Down Syndrome. That has been out 10 years. That's been out since 10 years ago, and it is still out. And basically, to answer your question, basically the reason why we written this book, because we want to encourage people to have hopes, dreams, and goals and feelings as everyone else.
Okay. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, but maybe Scott, you could tell us too what got you started as part of the Speakers Bureau.
Okay. My friend Mitch, who has gotten me started on the Speakers Bureau, because we both wanted to do the same thing. And I have spoken to many people about speaking with the Speakers Bureau. As a matter of fact, we did not too long ago talk to a school with a lot of third graders that have not heard about the Speakers Bureau.
When you talk to school groups and community groups, what is it that you try to relate to them from your own personal experience?
I think one of the things that we try to encourage many of these groups is really to allow is really to have people with disabilities to be able to be part of the community, and to be part to be part of the community, and to make them feel more included. I guess it's part of accepting people for who they are. There are many people with different types of disabilities. And I think that it's important for any community. It's important for many communities to accept people because they are just the same as anyone else, and they also have the same hopes and dreams as anyone else.
What kinds of questions do you get from the audience? Scott, when you spoke to the group of third graders, did the children have a chance to ask you questions?
Yes, they did. And what one of them said was, "Why are you like this?" And I said, "I was born with the disability that I have."
And what kind of reactions do you get from an audience of children, really, who may not have been exposed to people with disabilities?
The way I look at it, they haven't been to many of those. But somewhat of what I've seen with other schools, they're very accepting of people with disabilities.
I somewhat find the same thing because I've done a lot of things with many schools within the state and in other states as well, and I find that a lot of people, I find that many students feel the same way, that they really want to make the effort and to help and to encourage people with disabilities to be more involved in the school and even in the classroom, and I find that they are in fact doing so. And I find that not just in this state, in many other states as well.
I think one of the most important groups, and maybe Jackie, you want to join this discussion too, is parents, because I think, as you and I discussed, Mitch, it's so difficult for parents to understand the struggles of young people as they are transitioning from children's services and schools to adulthood. And I think it must be so helpful for young men like you to be expressing what you are going through at this stage of your life. What do you tell parents when they are looking at the beginning of more independence for their young adults and want some guidance as to how to help them achieve that?
It's been my experience when I talk to parents all over the country. I try to encourage them to be more involved in their child's life and to make them feel that they are a valued member of their community, and try to encourage them to be supportive and to really to be there for them when they need to have that guidance. And that is where to have siblings, like having a brother or sister always there, is also very helpful, because they can always help you out in many situations. Like, for example, now with me, when I went to school, I had the opportunity of going to the same school with my two sisters and my cousins, and they were very supportive, and my parents were very had encouraged me to go to them if I had any problems, or to go to them if I had any problems, or to get into situations, and they can help me to figure out solutions.
So you really had a support network from your family and in the school. How about you, Scott? Did you find that that the transition, and now you're living on your own, that your experience of moving out of your family's home and moving on to your own is something that you are sharing with other people?
Yeah, because I want to show people that people with disabilities can also live on their own.
Was it hard for you to make that move? I'm sure it was hard for Mom.
Well, no, it wasn't actually. I insisted on my mom moving me out.
How did you prepare yourself? How did both of you prepare yourselves to move out?
I was on a list for so many months, and finally one day, when you were coming home, I got a phone call from the building manager. Please come in, Scott. We have a possible vacancy.
So he actually had many months to think about moving out and to plan, you know, and to try to figure out what it was how he wanted to set that up for himself.
Right.
And when the moment came for him to move, it was quite a transition for all of us, because Scott doesn't have brothers and sisters, so he doesn't have the same supports that Mitchell had, and it was quite an event, and it has been it's been quite successful.
Right.
You were asking before a little bit about how we talk to parents, and I think one of the things that Mitchell was saying, and certainly one of the things that happened for Scott and his dad and me, was that we needed to listen as parents to what our children were saying, because they really do have a lot of good ideas and a lot of things that may not occur to us that they may want to do, either in terms of work or where they live or travel. It was something that really we had to make the time to sit and allow that, you know, to come up to the surface.
And I think it is difficult for any parent when a child is ready to move out, and you think about all of the implications of that, and we want our children to be safe, and we want to assure that they are going to be successful on their own. So I'm sure that that's very valuable information. Mitchell, could you talk a little bit about your work at WIHD and the Resource Center, and what you are doing to help other people get information?
Well, both Jackie and I work together at the Customer Resource Center. I am involved with many different projects. One of the projects that I'm involved with is a project that's dealing with oral health. And this project is geared to help people with disabilities, to remind them to brush their teeth. We are working with a group out in Denver, Colorado, called AbleLink. They are helping us to provide these palm palettes. The way this is set up, that these palm palettes will have a video and also an audio version. So when they do go into the bathroom morning and night, they will be able to use it. The other project that I'm currently working on is that I work with the Civil Advocacy Association and Ormond DD, And one of the projects actually is a grant that we have, and this is dealing with self-determination. That we try to this project is dealing with individuals with disabilities who have been living out on their own independently. We encourage people to be more self-determined, to feel good about themselves, to be able to go out and to talk to people, how it is like, to tell people their personal stories. And this is all part of self-determination. And I'm sure Jackie could
elaborate on
a little bit.
Yeah, I think the important thing about the self-determination project is that there is an effort to try to individualize the supports and services that people need to have the kind of life that they want to have. And it's important for young people to hear people like Mitchell and like Scott who have been able to be more independent but with supports. And I think that what the primary goal of it is to help people have options other than some of the more traditional services that are currently available. We're also working with people to try to help them take more control of their own health care.
Right.
And there is a grant that Mitchell works on around healthy lifestyles and teaching people how to do that.
Right.
There are people who are able and interested in doing that.
Okay, that's wonderful. Scott, are you working now too?
Yes, actually I am working currently at a movie theater, which I do not like the pay rate that
Well, we hope that your boss isn't watching.
that we're at right now, but
What else do you do?
I help people work on many things. I also have my own business, which is part of what I do. I normally get money through that as well, but I haven't been able to do it as much as I would like to.
What is the nature of that business, can I ask?
Well, sort of. We make plaques and posters and inspirational plaques for people like people in wheelchairs, people in certain situations that cannot be helped.
And do you work on a computer with that? Is that computerized, or you work up the slogans? And this is an interesting part. I work with someone out of New York City that helps me with that. So.
And you actually travel to sell these products.
I actually travel a lot to do these kind of services.
Right. Well, that sounds great, and I hope that it takes off. Maybe we can just spend the next couple of minutes, we only have 3 minutes left, talking about what consumers from through the Consumer Resource Bureau, what kind of information they can access, and how you are helping people in the county to get information.
I think there are different resources that we have. One, we were talking about before about we have information about self-determination, about and also about and also information how people with disabilities can be more information on how people with disabilities can be more involved in the communities. So we have different information that we could certainly could provide. We do also provide service coordination as well. So we certainly have information on how people could get service coordination by having more of the different by having different supports.
We work a lot with young people who are transitioning from the educational system into adult life, and we try to help them stay connected with one another in terms of a peer support and also a parent support network as well.
Okay, and I know that your mom started and is involved with the Family Connections group. So this parent support is a very important aspect, I'm sure. Well, we only have 1 more minute left. Do you think that we could just say something quickly about what we would hope communities would do to be more welcoming and accepting of people with disabilities?
I think for the communities, I think they should be very continue to encourage people with disabilities to be more involved in different activities that the communities have to offer, and to willing to support them any way that they can.
And I think that it's also important for communities to know that there are resources that can help them do some problem solving or do some brainstorming with them about how to include people with disabilities in just everyday life.
Right. Well, I'm sure that having representatives from this self-advocacy group really gives them some inspiration and some incredible ideas. And I think it's wonderful that you, Scott, and Mitchell are out there talking and representing people with special needs and people who can become much more productive members of our community. So thank you. Do you want to give a telephone number that people can reach you so that they can contact you for the Speakers Bureau?
Yes, there are 2 phone numbers. The phone numbers is our office, which is 914-493-2702, or the main office. Oh God, if I can remember, it's 518.
I think it might be on there.
Is that here in Schenectady?
Yes.
Yeah.
Schenectady? Okay,
Yes.
well then I will give that. And do you want to give a number for the Consumer Resource Center?
The Consumer Resource Center is the number that Mitchell mentioned. It's 914-493-2702. And we are available to answer really any type of question or hopefully provide, some direction for people.
Okay, well, thank you, and I will give that number, but I want to thank you again for all that you're doing and for joining us this evening. If people want information about the self-advocacy program, you can contact 518-382-1454. And we hope you'll stay tuned for our second half, which will deal with the therapeutic support program for people with autism. Welcome back to the Ways We Care of Westchester Jewish Community Services. I'm Dale Wang, Director of Community Relations. WJCS is in your community when you need us. We are funded by government grants, private individuals and foundations, UJA Federation, United Way, and corporations. In observance of March as Disabilities Awareness Month, we are talking this evening about supportive services for people with disabilities and their families. We recognize the efforts and achievements of people with disabilities. We also recognize that these people have tremendous abilities and strengths and are challenged by physical and mental deficits, that they develop methods of coping and finding success that help them become successful and meaningful members of our communities. In the first half, we talked to two young men who are involved in a speakers bureau that educates community and school groups about the efforts of people with disabilities and the importance of inclusion. In this half, we're going to focus on a therapeutic support program for people who have autism and the issues that they face. I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Leslie Bogan, who is the Chief Psychologist at WJCS. Welcome,
Hello.
Leslie. And Leslie Catan, who is our Coordinator of Outpatient Services for people with developmental disabilities.
Hi.
Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you.
Leslie, we had a very nice introduction this morning, earlier this evening, to what people with disabilities can actually do. And I wanted to give people another sense of the range of opportunities through WJCS, the types of programs that we offer. Could you give a little overview of that?
Sure. WJCS actually offers a relatively large range of services for people with disabilities and developmental disabilities, as well as other kinds of disabilities, through the Community Residential Care Division. Service coordination, which I think Mitch had mentioned, is a service that's offered to people who live in the community, children and adults with disabilities who live in the community, as well as to people who live in some of our community residences. Obvious segue is that we offer community support services and community residences for people who need a range of supports in their housing settings. And I don't remember exactly the number of houses we have now. It seems that
right
it's
now,
ever
I think
expanding.
There are 12.
Yeah. So we offer a range of housing opportunities for people with developmental disabilities and also people with traumatic brain injury. There's respite services. There's some home health services that are available. In the clinical end of things, we have a specialized mental health program for people who are developmentally disabled and who also may have some emotional or psychiatric issues. There's an adult social club. There's an adolescent program. There's this new program that we'll be talking about for children with autistic spectrum disorders. Did I mention respite?
You did.
Okay.
The Family Advocacy
Family
program.
Advocacy is a program that is geared for adolescents with developmental disabilities and their families, providing social, recreational opportunities for the kids, but also activities that we hope will help them to be prepared for the transition out of school-based and into adult-based, community-based life. And I think Mitch and Scott both mentioned the value and importance of helping people think about being prepared for that transition and think about the creative ways that they might make that happen.
Okay, well, I think that's a good overview and a good segue into one of our newest programs, which really addresses a growing issue and something, as I mentioned, we're going to be watching on the network channels. So programs about people with autistic spectrum disorders. And Leslie, maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into what this means and why we're suddenly hearing so much about autism.
Well, you are correct in calling it a spectrum disorder because it really represents a spectrum of symptoms. The general class is called pervasive developmental disorders, and under that are a variety of cluster symptoms. So, for example, you have heard the term Asperger's, autism, Rett's disorders, child disintegrative disorder, and they share a couple of things in common. There is a social disability, an inability to interact with others in a comfortable way, and the second is some kind of a communication disorder. And then there are different varieties along with that, but those are the two core symptom areas that all of the pervasive developmental disorder spectrum disabilities have in common. Now, you also asked why does it suddenly seem to be more common? And that is a hard question to answer. We know that, for example, Asperger's is a diagnosis that did not come into existence until 1994.
Oh, really?
Right?
Wow.
In terms of its coming into the formal psychiatric Bible, the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual. So, of course, once it becomes an official diagnosis, psychiatrists and other mental health professionals are more likely to be able to find it. So now that attention has been brought to these diagnoses, we're much more aware of it. There are some people who contend that it is also the result of various toxins and environmental factors that may be making this a truly more prevalent, not only that we're diagnosing it more frequently and more accurately.
Mm-hmm. So now you separated out Asperger's. What would be the difference between a diagnosis of autism and a diagnosis of Asperger's?
Okay. Typically, a child with Asperger will have normal or above average intelligence. Very often, autistic children are mentally retarded. Okay. So it's the level of intelligence is one significant difference. The other is, although children with Asperger's may often have social communication difficulties, their language development tends to be normal, whereas children with autism, their language development is delayed. Those are two of the big differences.
It seemed that until several years ago, and maybe it's only because I am a layperson, but people felt that children with autism didn't communicate at all. Have there been developments that have enabled children with autism to begin to communicate and to participate in more mainstream kinds of educational settings, community settings, things of that sort?
I think yes. The answer is yes, although at this point, the last statistic I saw was that 60% of autistic children remain mute. In other words, they do not speak. That doesn't mean that they don't communicate, but they don't communicate through speech. But there are all kinds of sign languages and picture symbol kind of ways that autistic children can be taught to speak. Also, the earlier that children are caught and given more intensive speech and language services, the more likely that they will be able to develop speech.
Okay, let's turn to you, Leslie. This Therapeutic Support Services program is quite new for us. Tell me a little bit about what its goals are, who you are targeting, and how you're going to begin to work with people.
We noticed, those of us working in the Developmental Disabilities Counseling Program, which is the specialized mental health program I mentioned earlier, had noticed over the last few years increasing number of phone calls, primarily from family members who were referring their children or asking for help with their children who had one of the pervasive developmental disabilities. Oftentimes, most often, the calls were coming in for children who had Asperger's syndrome, who were having difficulty in school. And what we noticed was that there was a cluster of age ranges, which we think we understand why, of children who were being referred to the clinic for help in managing their environments. And I'm being rather broad here for a reason. When we looked at the number of calls, what we saw, the trends that we were seeing were the referrals were coming from families whose children were in first or second grade. This is general, obviously. This is not everyone, but there was certainly a cluster of kids who were parents were noticing or worrying about or being told that their children were really having difficulties in the school setting around first and second grade, 7, 8, 9 years old. And then we also noticed there was a cluster of calls that were coming in about children who were early adolescents, and that those children were struggling with some of the social interactions. Now, I'm generalizing clearly, but the patterns that we noticed is that there was much need for help in helping children develop social skills, and so the grant that we are about to start, or the program that we are about to start, based on the grant that we received from UJA, is really geared towards helping children who have higher functioning autism or Asperger's syndrome participate in a group that is focused on developing social skills, helping children develop social skills. And those groups we expect to start next month.
Which would be March or April?
We're hoping at the end of March.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of who those children are, what we're looking at, as I mentioned earlier, are children probably who are 10 to 12, 10 to 13 years old, in that age range, who have been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome or high-functioning autism. In addition to the group for the children, we're also offering a parent support group for those parents whose children will be participating in the group, but also parents whose children may not meet the criteria that we're looking for, and that and so parents are able to participate in the parent support group, whether their children are participating or not. And I think, as Mitchell had said, siblings are an important piece here, and the experience of siblings who have a brother or sister, more often than not a brother, who has an autistic spectrum disorder. Those kids have, again, trends, certain issues that they struggle with as well. And so we're hoping that if we have the right cluster of kids, we will also be offering a sibling support group.
Okay. I want to just get a little bit more background, because you had mentioned that Asperger's is much more prevalent among boys, is it? And can you talk about some of the what other characteristics, what's the cause, and why would it be more prevalent among boys rather than girls? What are some of the characteristics of autism and Asperger's?
I would say that a typical Asperger child, again, generalizing, would have difficulty with social relatedness and also has difficulty with something called theory of the mind. In other words, a typically developing child will understand that someone else, that another person, has thoughts and feelings and ideas that are different from his or her own. That is a concept that's very, very difficult for a typical child with Asperger's to grasp. And that's going to have all sorts of implications, not only in social relatedness, but also in some abstract reasoning kind of things. A typical child with Asperger's might have difficulty with transitioning, has difficulty changing, deviating from a routine, right? Routine is incredibly important. Also tends to have very sensitive sensory organs, so that any sort of stimuli that you and I would just ignore, like the way that my jacket feels on my shoulders, might be intolerable. or a loud noise might be intolerable for many of these kids on the spectrum. Again, an Asperger's child tends to have difficulty with anything that is not concrete. So metaphorical language might completely be misunderstood. So I know of one child whose parents said, "I'm about to lose my patience." And the child said, "Well, I'll help you look for it." I mean, it's just, it's that kind of a, kind of a thing. And it's interesting, it makes sense that a lot of these issues for Asperger kids are arising when they go to school, when they are challenged with peers and having to deal with changes in routines that may be very comfortable for them.
I also think, if I could add to that, that children with Asperger's are less likely to be picked up or diagnosed younger, whereas children with the more classic autistic features are more likely to be picked up when at a younger age. So that families are really starting to notice the difference in social ability and social interaction. Maybe not in kindergarten so much, because 4 and 5-year-olds lots of 4 and 5-year-olds have difficulty with
and the
developing. That's right, normal development. But by 1st and 2nd grade, you start to see some of the real differences in children's ability to appropriately interact with other kids. So it certainly reinforces the trends that we were seeing. And of course that happens again in early adolescence. Most children have a difficulty at 10, 11, and 12 years old. It's not an easy time for a lot of children, especially as you get closer to 12, 13, 14.
Right.
And so again, difficulties sort of seem to emerge at around that age range.
So this isn't necessarily a factor of the condition changing. Is it the environment changing and the child's ability to adapt based on the condition and the symptoms?
Well, we know that lots of children have difficulty with transitions, as Leslie mentioned. So if you have a child going into middle school who has to adapt to changing classrooms and lots of kids in the hallways and new noises and different sensory stimulus, that child may show more difficulty behaviorally in managing that environment.
Now, you are running this as a group program. What is the advantage of doing it in a group, and why did you choose to tackle these issues as group rather than individual?
Well, let me say that we do see some of these kids on an individual basis. But the group modality forces social interaction, or I shouldn't say forces, but it gives you the opportunity to practice social interactional skills. In an ideal world, we would have a very integrated group, and whether or not we'll ever be able to do that, I'm not quite sure, because that would allow children with Asperger's or high-functioning autism to also see other typical children and their social interaction. So there's a modeling aspect there. Right now, we're not doing the integrated group, but we did feel that the group setting allows us to practice here and now on an experiential level the skills that we're talking about teaching.
What has been your experience in terms of helping young people to change their behaviors and to become more appropriate in social situations?
Well, because it is a pervasive developmental disability, meaning that it affects so many areas of the child's life, that is multiple interventions generally are called for. So a child with sensory integration difficulties might benefit from PT or OT services. With specialization on sensory integration. They will benefit from a speech and language, not only for developing speech in the case of children with autism, but learning pragmatics, learning social communication skills through the speech and language area can be very helpful. One of the things that we have found is that children with Asperger's are very likely to develop anxiety and depression. So individual therapy that Leslie was referring to can be very helpful for those kinds of symptoms. Sometimes medication is called for. There is no cure for any of these things, but sometimes medication can help to manage the symptoms. So if you have a very aggressive child, it may be useful to give the child antipsychotics that can be used to limit that. Same thing for depressive symptoms. Stimulants that are used for ADHD can sometimes help some of the overactivity that we sometimes see. So medication may be an adjunct. And as Leslie said, social skills training in a group is extremely helpful because it permits the child to have other people doing for him or her what he can't do for himself. As we said, the child has no theory of mind. Someone else is reflecting back to him all of the time what it is, how he or she is coming across in a way that he cannot judge for himself.
And because in a group things change and people interact and behave differently, it also is a way to teach those kinds of this concept of understanding other people's actions and thoughts across various social interactions, so that it's not just the child with the therapist, it's the child with the therapist and the therapist involved with the child's interaction with other children. And so there's a range of interactions in a group setting that you can address and help each child handle in a more effective manner.
We've talked a little bit about what the goals might be for the groups with children. What will be the goals for your groups with parents?
It's one of the major issues that we hear from our parents is feeling very isolated, having a child with a disability, and particularly a child with a pervasive developmental disability. And sometimes there are nice connections that can be made, but oftentimes the families feel as though they can't share the struggles that they have with their friends who have neurotypical children, or their friends are interested and want to know and want to be supportive, but feel that they really just don't get it in terms of the constant stressors. As well as the sense of success, and that is sometimes hard for other families to see because it's not measured in the same way. So we want families to feel good about what they're doing, and we want them to feel like there's a community that supports them. And clearly we want to give them strategies in advocating for their children, and in dealing with their children and dealing with their children's behavior, dealing with the school, thinking about transition, what happens down the road. There's a whole slew of things that we could potentially address. Pervasive to that is my wish that they feel that they are connected and part of a community that supports them.
Okay. You are also planning to offer a Jewish piece to this. As you mentioned, this is sponsored by UJA Federation, but it's open to anyone. You are also offering a particular Jewish aspect.
Yes, we
Could
are.
you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. This year we're going to offer, we had one group in December. We will have 4 more workshops that will be co-led by a staff member with Pam Wax, who is our spiritual care coordinator at WJCS. And each workshop will be focused on a particular issue that is embedded in Jewish liturgy. So there are various concepts, one of which is sort of in the eyes of God. That's one of the workshops that we will be offering. There seems to be an interest in having a spiritual aspect to healing, to support, and to a sense of community. So yes, that will also be part of the program.
Okay.
Yes.
We only have 3 minutes left. I know it goes so fast, you can't believe it. I wonder if you could just speak a little bit to the prospects for improved functioning for kids with autism, and what you anticipate with these kinds of interventions that life can become for them.
you know, it's a very individualized case, but I think the earlier that we intervene with children who are on the spectrum, the more likely they are to be fully functioning adults. We can make a difference, certainly in terms of the social skills groups and some of the other interventions that we discussed. There is no cure, however, for any of these spectrum disorders. We're talking about brain disorders. So we can only hope to give compensatory skills and supports that will help the children ultimately gain the skills that many neurotypical kids develop on their own.
Mm-hmm. So as they go through life, they're able to meet the challenges, the different life challenges as they approach them.
I think it's hard to imagine sometimes. I think Scott and Mitch are, while not on the autistic spectrum, people with disabilities who have dreamed about having a life that they feel good about. And I don't know that we can predict that exactly, but that we would want to support the kids that we're working with and their families so that they can dream about their future as well.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, I know when I was a child growing up, the child with Down syndrome was never going to be someone who lived on his own and was speaking
Part of a speaking
to
bureau. It's
other
wonderful.
people. So in that amount of time, which is longer than I want to admit, we've certainly made a difference. Leslie, just give us some information about how people get in touch with you for the program and when it will start and who's eligible.
Sure. The social skills groups are for children who are diagnosed with high-functioning autism or Asperger's, maybe PDD or NOS, and I say that because it is very individualized, and we would like to make it as open as possible and still bring together a group of kids who can work well together. The groups will be held on Thursday nights. We are hoping at the end of March. We're in the process of doing intakes now, so if people are interested, it would be a good time to call. They can reach either myself or Carrie Phillips, who is doing the intakes right now. We'll be co-facilitating the children's group. Should I give that number?
Yes.
Okay, is 914-949-7699. I'm at extension 377, and Carrie is at extension 369. So either one. The parent groups will be happening at the same time on Thursday evenings, as will the sibling group, so that families can come together. One of the things that we hope to do on a monthly basis is to have a family dinner time together as a way to help support this idea of community and making connections with other families.
Okay, just give the telephone number for you one more time, and then we have to say goodnight.
It's 914-949-7699, extension 377, or by email, which is lcatan@wjcs.com.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Leslie Bogan and Leslie Catan for all you're doing. And if people want any further information about WJCS services for people with disabilities, please call us at 761-0600. And good night.